Barron Trump gives up first-class seat for veteran. Then the unbelievable happens. The moment Barron Trump surrendered his first-class seat to an elderly veteran, a ripple of surprise went through the cabin. But no one could have foreseen the astonishing family secret, buried for decades, that was about to erupt mid-flight. A revelation that would leave the passengers in stunned, emotional silence. The air hung thick with that familiar pre-flight tension, a low hum of anticipation mixed with the rustle of boarding passes and the clatter of carry-ons. Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport bustled, a symphony of hurried footsteps and muffled announcements. Flight 247 to Newark was packed tighter than a politician's schedule. Amidst the throng, a young man moved with a quiet grace that belied the whispers that followed him. Barron Trump. Yeah, that Trump. But he wasn't throwing his weight around. No entourage, no fuss. Just a kid, albeit a towering one, heading to his first-class seat, trying to be invisible. You could practically taste the curiosity in the air. He settled into the plush window seat, the leather sighing softly beneath him. Headphones on, a thick hardback in his hands. Something serious, not some celebrity gossip rag. He was trying, you could see it, to fade into the background. Didn't want the stares, the hushed comments. Being a Trump in the public eye? Must be a trip. Across the aisle, heading towards the back of the plane, an older man shuffled along. He carried himself with a quiet dignity, but the years, you could see, had taken their toll. Stooped shoulders, a cane tapping lightly on the floor, a worn leather duffel, his only luggage. Passengers' eyes followed him, not in a rude way, but with a kind of respect. He wore a faded military jacket, patches and medals, stories etched in fabric. Vietnam, maybe? Cordell. You just knew he'd seen things. Things most of us can't even imagine. He found his seat way back in economy, wedged between a dude in a loud Hawaiian shirt yapping on his phone and a mom wrestling with a stroller and a screaming toddler. Rough draw. Up in first class, the flight attendants were all smiles and efficiency, the pre-flight dance of safety demos and beverage offers. Then it happened. A ripple of unease spread through the back of the plane. The veteran was looking agitated, talking to the flight attendant with a worried frown. Something about his seat. He kept apologizing, his voice low and gravelly, but you could tell he was stressed. Barron, who'd been pretending to read, glanced up. He watched the scene unfold, his brow furrowed. For a second, he just observed, then he hit the call button. The little light flickered on above him. "Excuse me," he said, his voice surprisingly deep for his age, polite but with a quiet authority. When the flight attendant arrived, he looked her straight in the eye. "Could I switch seats with the gentleman in the military jacket?" The flight attendant blinked, caught off guard. A beat of stunned silence hung in the air. People in first class, the ones sipping their pre-departure champagne, looked up, their eyebrows raised. Give up a first-class seat? Voluntarily? For someone in? A woman across the aisle, dripping in designer everything, leaned towards him, a puzzled expression on her face. "You don't have to do that, you know. You paid for this seat." Her tone wasn't accusatory, more confused, like she couldn't compute the logic of it. Barron just gave her a small, almost shy smile. "Some people deserve it more," he said simply. That shut her up. The flight attendant returned, her expression a mix of surprise and genuine admiration. "He said he'd be happy to switch," she announced, her voice carrying a hint of emotion. It wasn't every day you saw that kind of selflessness, especially from someone who, let's be honest, probably didn't have to think twice about anything. Barron nodded, picked up his bag, and started down the aisle. All eyes were on him. Whispers followed in his wake. He walked with a purpose, ignoring the stares, focused on the man in the back. A few people even pulled out their phones, sneaky snaps happening in the dim light. He reached the veteran, who looked up bewildered. "Are you sure, young man?" he asked, his voice raspy. "You don't have to do this for me." There was a genuine humility in his eyes, like he couldn't quite believe it. "I want to," Barron replied, extending his hand. His grip was firm, confident. "Thank you for your service. Please take my seat." The veteran hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty in his gaze. But there was something in Barron's sincerity that was undeniable. Slowly, he stood, his hand trembling slightly as he took Barron's. "Well, thank you." That's mighty kind of you. As the veteran made his way to the front, a visible change came over him. He walked a little taller, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. The murmurs in economy intensified. A young mom in row 15 whispered to her daughter, her voice full of wonder. "Did you see that? He just gave up his seat." The businessman next to Barron raised an eyebrow, shaking his head. "Never seen anything like that on a flight," he muttered, half to himself. Barron squeezed into the economy seat, his long legs a bit cramped. He didn't seem to mind. Pulled out his book, completely unfazed by the attention. A flight attendant, her face etched with concern, leaned down. "Are you all right, Mr. Trump? Can I get you anything?" He just shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. Up in first class, the veteran sank into the plush seat, a look of almost disbelief on his face. He adjusted the armrest, his hands still trembling a little. The flight attendant offered him a drink, a warm blanket. "The young man said you should have this seat," she explained, her voice gentle. The veteran smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached his eyes. "It's been years since I've been treated like this," he murmured mostly to himself. He glanced back towards economy, where Barron was already lost in his book. A small act, a huge impact. For a moment, the cabin seemed to breathe easier. The tension of boarding dissolved. The plane taxied onto the runway. Engines roared. The plane ascended. But the story? It was just getting started. What seemed like a simple act of decency was about to take a turn no one saw coming. And then the veteran spoke. Cruising altitude. The steady hum of the engines filled the cabin, a backdrop to the unfolding drama. Flight attendants made their rounds, but the air crackled with an unspoken energy. Eyes darted between Barron in economy and the veteran in first. Whispers of admiration had become a low buzz. The veteran sat quietly at first, sipping his water, gazing out the window, his thoughts a million miles away. His hands rested on his lap, the faint tremor still present. Then, as if a dam had broken, he turned to the woman beside him, a kind-faced lady with silver hair. "I have to say something," he began, his voice low but firm, needing to be heard. The woman turned, her curiosity piqued. The veteran touched the small pin on his lapel, a purple heart. He took a deep breath. "That young man, the one who gave me this seat, his family saved my life once." The woman blinked, surprised. "What do you mean?" The veteran leaned back, the years melting away as he began his story. "It was decades ago. Vietnam. I was just a kid, scared and alone. Shot up bad. Legs all messed up. When I finally got back stateside, I was lost. No family, no direction, no nothing." His voice wavered, the memories raw even after all this time. "I ended up in New York trying to pick up the pieces, living on scraps. One day I was outside a diner, just existing, and a man saw me. Saw I was struggling. He didn't just toss me a buck and walk away. He sat down with me, listened to my story. That man was Donald Trump's father, Fred." The woman's eyes widened. A few nearby passengers who'd been strategically pretending not to eavesdrop leaned in closer. "Fred Trump?" she asked, her voice hushed with disbelief. The veteran nodded, a wistful smile on his face. "Yes, he didn't owe me a damn thing, but he made sure I had a roof over my head. Got me a job, helped me get back on my feet, never asked for anything in return. Just said, 'You serve this country, it's the least we can do.' I'll never forget those words." By now, the story had spread through first class. Heads turned, whispers intensified. The veteran's voice grew stronger, fueled by emotion. "I always wanted to thank his family. But life just gets in the way. The moment passed. I thought it was gone forever. And now, today, his grandson. He's given me a gift I'll never forget." What are the odds of something like this happening? Down in economy, Barron was still immersed in his book, completely oblivious to the emotional earthquake he'd triggered. Long legs awkwardly crammed into the tight space. But up front, the veteran's revelation had struck a deep chord. Passengers exchanged stunned glances. Murmurs of amazement rippled through the cabin. One of the flight attendants, her eyes shining with unshed tears, leaned towards the veteran. "Would you like me to tell him what you just shared?" she asked softly, her voice thick with emotion. The veteran hesitated, then shook his head. Not yet. Let the boy have his peace. He doesn't need to know how much this means to me. Not right now. But the passengers? They were buzzing. It wasn't just a random act of kindness anymore. It felt like destiny, like the universe had orchestrated this moment. The veteran sat in quiet contemplation, his story hanging in the air. Nearby passengers exchanged glances, the silence pregnant with unspoken thoughts. This wasn't just a flight anymore. It was a shared human experience. The man across the aisle from the veteran, mid-40s, tired-looking but with kind eyes, broke the silence. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said, his voice a little shaky, but your story really hit home. My grandfather served in Vietnam too. He used to talk about how much it meant when people back home cared enough to help. Hearing what Fred Trump did for you, well, that's rare. Too rare. The veteran nodded, a faint smile gracing his lips. It's the little things, son. People don't realize how far a small act of kindness can go. Back then, I thought my life was over. But that man's generosity, it gave me a second chance. Across the aisle, a young mother, cradling her sleeping baby, chimed in. You know, my dad used to say the same thing. He wasn't a veteran, but he always told me that when someone lifts you up, even just a little, you pass it on. It's like a chain reaction. What Barron did today, it's proof that kindness still matters. The veteran's eyes softened as he listened. It's true, and it's not just about big gestures. Sometimes just being seen, being acknowledged can change everything. That's what Fred Trump did for me, and it's what his grandson has done for me again today. Passengers continued to share their own stories, each one a testament to the power of human connection. A flight attendant, visibly moved, sat on the armrest of an empty seat near the veteran. I wasn't planning to say anything, she admitted, her voice catching, but my brother served in Iraq. He didn't talk much about it. But when he came home, he told me that the people who stopped to thank him or helped him out in small ways, those were the moments that stuck with him. Sometimes those moments were the only thing keeping him going. The veteran nodded in understanding, his expression a mix of empathy and quiet pride. Your brother's right. It's the little things that keep you grounded when everything else feels like it's falling apart. Down in economy, Barron noticed a few passengers glancing back at him, their faces a mixture of awe and gratitude. He still didn't have the full picture, but he offered a polite nod to a woman who smiled warmly at him. His simple gesture had unleashed a wave of emotions and connections throughout the cabin. The veteran turned to the flight attendant. You know, he said, his voice thoughtful, I've always believed that gratitude doesn't just stop with the person who helps you. It grows. Fred Trump helped me rebuild my life, and I've spent every day since trying to honor that by helping others. Today, Barron reminded me of that mission. It's funny how life works, isn't it? The plane hit a patch of turbulence, a slight jolt, but the mood in the cabin remained calm, almost serene. The conversations felt like a shared moment of catharsis, as if everyone on board was connected by an invisible thread of kindness and resilience. The plane began its descent into Newark. Conversations quieted, a peaceful hum settling over the cabin. The veteran sat gazing out the window, lost in thought. Across the aisle, passengers exchanged knowing glances, still marveling at the unexpected turn of events. Just as the captain announced the final approach, the flight attendant who had been listening to the veteran approached Barron in economy. She knelt beside him, meeting his eye level. I wanted to let you know, she said softly, that the gentleman you gave your seat to, he shared something extraordinary about your family. Would you like to hear it? Barron looked up from his book, genuine curiosity on his face. He closed the cover slowly. Sure, he replied, his tone calm but intrigued. The attendant hesitated, searching for the right words. Years ago, your grandfather, Fred Trump, helped him when he was at his lowest point. He said your grandfather gave him a place to live and a job, expecting nothing in return. And today, you did something for him that reminded him of that kindness. For a moment, Barron was silent, his expression unchanged, but his eyes softened, a hint of emotion flickering within them. That's something, isn't it? He finally said, a quiet understanding in his voice. The flight attendant smiled gently. It is. I thought you should know. As the plane touched down, a collective sigh of relief swept through the cabin. The veteran stood, ready to disembark. To everyone's surprise, he walked directly to the economy section, his eyes scanning the rows until he found Barron. The young man, now standing to retrieve his bag, looked up, surprised. The veteran extended his hand. "Young man," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I wanted to thank you face to face. What you did today, it brought me full circle. Your family has a history of kindness, and you've carried that forward. Never forget how much these moments matter." Barron shook his hand firmly, his voice steady but quiet. "I didn't do anything special, sir. You deserved it." The cabin was silent, everyone watching the exchange, some with tears in their eyes, others with thoughtful smiles. The connection between these two men, generations apart, was palpable, a living testament to the power of empathy. As passengers disembarked, many paused to thank Barron for his gesture. Others approached the veteran, offering handshakes and words of gratitude for his service. The atmosphere was unlike anything anyone had ever experienced on a flight. At the gate, the veteran turned back one last time, tipping his hat towards Barron. "You got a good heart, son. Don't ever lose that." Barron nodded, his usual reserved demeanor softening just enough to show the impact of the words. As he walked towards baggage claim, he pulled out his phone and typed a brief message. He hesitated for a moment, then hit send. The text read, "Grandpa would have been proud of today." This story is a reminder of how one small act of kindness can ripple far beyond its moment, connecting people in ways we never anticipate. Kindness, gratitude, and empathy. These are the values that transcend time and place, creating bonds that endure. Let's remember that the next time we have the chance to offer a little kindness, no matter how small it may seem,